Welcome to Chalk and Code,
where the science of learning meets modern technology.
We're bringing together entrepreneurs, product leaders, researchers, and advocates
to spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of learning. All right, well, welcome to Chalk and Code again, where we explore new and novel directions in education, technology, and leadership. Today's guest is Steve Stookey, co-founder of CypherWorx. CypherWorx is an award-winning online educational company and LMS provider that specializes in custom professional development and compliance training in sectors like business and in K-12 and higher education, but also in more niche markets like cultural attractions. You might think museums or zoos. I'll let Steve talk about some additional of those, something else about those markets if he likes. But Steve joins us today to discuss his journey from corporate sales leadership, from Paychex Inc. to social entrepreneurship, the evolution of compliance training, and how CypherWorx is driving efficiency and cultural transformation through what I've heard them describe as purposeful professional development. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Theron. I appreciate it.
It is wonderful to welcome you here. I know you spent over 2 decades at Paychex, so I'm really curious about your journey from there to CypherWorx.
Yes, and it's a very important part of the story for me. I grew up in a family that was very supportive of education, but I came out of college with a degree in business with a minor in economics, and of course, like many of us, had no idea what I wanted to do. Paychex Payroll Company was a very young company at the time when I graduated, 1989, a long time ago. And it was up and coming. It was, gosh, if you could get a job there, it would be terrific. And people were like, "Hey, Steve, you're a great guy. You're very social. So why don't you go into sales?" So I started out there in the telemarketing department, and it was a horrific, terrible, wonderful experience, as you can imagine. But the key issue here that is so important is that the way that Paychex is designed is all about training and professional development. So they're consistently one of the top 100 training companies in the United States year after year. And so when I started at Paychex, I knew most every employee at Paychex at the time. And I think now there's something like $64 billion company. It's very, very large. Very successful, but a key part of that success was their dedication to training and education. And so it was very much a part of the culture. And even to the point that their new corporate headquarters that they had built at the time, everything was built around the training center. So when you would go into the training center, you could look across from one conference room into another and see executives getting trained, frontline staff being trained, and so forth. And so as I came through the ranks at Paychex, got my promotions, et cetera, it was a gift. It was a badge of honor to be asked to come back to the training center and participate in that. And one of the formative moments there, just talking about the culture, was I remember a senior manager coming to me and pulling me out and saying, "Hey, Steve, I just read this great book. I think you'd really love it." And that was... I share that because a lot of organizations like to say they do training and education and so forth. This is really the culture shift. And so that's what I came from. And it was my first job out of school. And so I didn't know any better, right? I didn't know how lucky I was and how great I had it. Well, fast forward, they wound up sending me around the country, across to Seattle, Washington. I became a manager, and they would ask me to come back to the training center and teach. And I just loved it. Number one, because it was a free ride back home to see my family. But most importantly, I got to really get engaged with the whole educational process and really watch the sparks come and watch people become very successful through the training that we provided. So it was really a great transition there. So at the same time, my best friend from high school wound up working in nonprofit organizations. He worked at the zoo. He worked at the museum, Rochester Museum and Science Center. And then he became the executive director of the Baltimore Museum of Industry. So we always kept in touch. He became an adjunct professor at Medaille College. And he came to me one day and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting an online training company because we're having challenge trying to keep up with our compliance training." They had a charter school, they had summertime program, and they had specific compliance training that they had to do. And it was all at the time was in person. And they had high turnover. And he was like, "I can't look somebody in the eye and say we're within compliance all the time." I said, "That's a great idea because I actually just pitched this idea internally to my manager. We're one of the top 100 training companies. Why don't we offer this to our clients?" So that's where this was started. I became one of the first investors, and about a year and a half later, Paul, my partner, called me and said, "Hey, you need to quit your job and come help us grow this thing." So
What's been the most important lesson you've learned since you've joined?
Um, I think the most important lesson that I've learned and collectively that we've learned is being nimble, and I'll also say being listening to our clients. Our clients will tell us what they want, and by listening and being nimble and being able to pivot, that's what's been a big secret of ours. And also giving ourselves the grace to understand that the team that we've assembled of really passionate people, they really know their stuff, and we've been able to grow primarily by word of mouth because people have had such great experience working with the team and the things that they produce. Um, it's just been a tremendous amount of fun there.
Did you you mentioned the strength of the people in it, and anytime someone brings that up in particular, I wonder how deliberate they are being about the culture. And the reason I asked the question is because years ago, you remember the book from Jim Collins about Good to Great, and how you have to get the right people into the organization and the right people into the right places in the organization. And I wondered if that's what's behind that particular comment.
Yes, and I think, there was an interesting thing about making that transition from, Paychex, which was a big organization, going to a startup, which is, basically, myself and Paul. Um, and we like the idea of the fact that you can choose who you get to work with, right? And that's really important. And then also being able to make decisions pretty quickly. If it's not going to work out, make that decision quickly, because we've seen it in our careers where people that aren't aligned with the principles that you have can create a lot of problems.
Right.
So
Creating that initial culture will drive everything else. If people understand the culture, understand the beliefs and the values, then they can make decisions on their own. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? You can move faster when people are that well aligned.
yes, and in being able to trust that those individuals have the best in mind for the clients and for the people. At the end of the day, the people that work with us, we're just so fortunate. They care very deeply about doing a good job, doing the right thing. And I always joke and say, none of us are driving Ferraris here. It is really a social entrepreneurial type of position. And fortunately, we did well enough in our careers that we can kind of afford to do that and pour every electron and ounce of effort back into doing good for the community. So that's what's going to make me feel good when I'm on my rocking chair at the end of my life. So
Right. Yes, I hear you. I was listening to Mr. Cypher talk about CypherWorx, and I'm gonna read. I think I got the quote right, but I'm just going to ask you to react to it because it kind of follows along in the thread of the conversation that we've had so far. We make a difference in the industries we make a difference in the industries we're in that can sometimes be life-changing and life-saving work. How does that apply to something like an LMS, especially this one?
yeah, so I would go more to the content, meaning that we work with nonprofit organizations. We work with zoos and aquariums, as you mentioned. Those were some of our earlier partners. YMCAs. I think we work with about 80 YMCAs across the country right now, and we really solve those problems. Fire departments, we provide all of the fire and EMS training for the state of New York, and continuing to grow those types of things. And one thing that was kind of surprising to me is like even in zoos and aquariums, the amount of injuries and deaths that happened in zoos and aquariums was really pretty shocking to me. And when we started getting feedback from zoo leaders and so forth saying, we need this training, we need to keep working with CypherWorx because it saves lives.
Yeah.
How fulfilling is that?
Yeah.
But then also on the day-to-day basis, during all this time, my kiddos are growing up, and I'm watching them, and of course, you care very deeply about your children and the success of society and what's going on. Where can I make a difference? The quality of the education and giving people the opportunity, that was, kind of Paul from his perspective. He grew up in the South Side of Chicago. It was rough. And he brings that experience day to day of, we need to help people that don't have the resources. There might be out there in rural areas, and we need to give them the opportunities. There's a lot of wonderful, smart people out there that all they need is a leg up. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the product itself. CollabNation, if memory serves.
Yes, collaboration.
When we, you know, here at Flexion, when we think about products in edtech, we often draw this distinction between products that serve education as a system, and we think of that as education with a capital E, and products that are really designed to serve the individual learner and say spark some sense of discovery or some personal growth. And it's not that one is better than the other. They exist almost like on a continuum is how we think of it. So you might have in a school district a student information system that clearly is an application that serves the process of managing student data. And then a gentleman that I spoke to a week or two ago, Dr. Gage at Backyard Brains. Backyard Brains is a maker, and his stated goal is to create interest in neuroscience, and he does that through these products. They're very interesting, but I think of that, kind of as two pieces, two ends of this continuum. Capital E education as a system, lowercase e education as something that's kind of really aimed right at the individual learner. Where would CollabNation fall on that continuum?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because when I had conversations like this, one of the things that I let people know is we started out as an instructional design company, not as a learning management system delivery system. And instructional design is part of our DNA, which is making these courses very interactive, engaging, fun, and you walk away with knowledge and that confidence. And so during our process of doing this, we even do efficacy studies. So we'll create courses, and then we work with a professor at San Diego State University. We'll do a whole efficacy study, taking a group of folks to where they're at, giving them the learning intervention, and then measuring that afterwards, measuring the knowledge afterwards, and then also the retention down the way, because we wanted to really prove the efficacy of the courses that we're taking. So I share that with you to go to the learning management system, because when we started out, we obviously had to have a delivery system. So we wound up using Moodle, and we decided, it was open source and so forth, but it was really about the learner experience, right? So when you think about, human behavior of, all right, I've got to go in and take this training, right? It might be a compliance training. It might be bloodborne pathogens or something like that as a requirement. I want to go in and have a very easy experience with no friction and feel like I got something out of it. And then that's why we wound up making the decision to create our own learning management system, which we called CollabNation. And we really wanted to have a collaborative environment. So it's not just a delivery system for online courses, but the ability to track and manage live in-person training, and then also the ability to track and manage certifications like third-party training, right? A lot of times people will go out to a conference or another learning management system. And so we built in all kinds of integrations, et cetera, to again make this process really very smooth for them. Partly because of my interaction or my experience in the payroll world, it was also important for us to be able to integrate with their payroll HRIS system or their student information system. And then also at the same time, being able to, for those organizations that maybe already had a learning management system that they're happy with, having a mechanism of delivering the courses that we want, that they want to have available. So again, I go back to being flexible, being nimble, listening to what folks want. And it is a funny journey in the fact that, when we created the learning management system, we wanted to create, point systems and all these other wonderful things that we created. And we found out pretty quickly that some of those things were not what the community was asking for. And so we wound up making changes and adapting and so forth, and really came up with um, a solution that people really love and they engage with. But one of those things that we also do is somebody completes a course. Well, then they're obviously they're suggested a few other courses that they might be interested in as well. And the hope is that, hey, I'll be engaged with that. I had a great experience, and I'm going to continue to feed my level of curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, so I have, oh gosh, I've got like 3 or 4 questions that just based on what you've described. I think the first that I'd like to ask is about efficacy and engagement, since you mentioned both words. Uh, the Often in K-12, the products look to gamify what they're doing, to engage, a particular kind of learner, a learner who is, still in school. So did I hear you correctly? Did you your description implied, at least the way I heard it, that that wasn't necessarily the right approach for adult learners. Did I understand that correctly?
So no, what I would do is I would go back and say that your comment about engaging the learners with different types of learning games or gamification, right? So card flip activities and that type of thing. And I almost want to go back to the notion of, right, our world of cell phones and social media and so forth, of really kind of quick hits. You hear things like micro learning, et cetera. But the interesting thing is a lot of the certification courses have to, out of requirements, be an hour long. And so we want to make sure that things, we include some text, and maybe there's video, and maybe there's a drag and drop activity. Maybe there's a mnemonic that we need to teach, those types of things, so that my brain is constantly firing and I'm using left brain, right brain, and I'm really engaged in that way. And then I also have learning checks to help coach me along the way. Am I understanding the concepts as I go? And then, of course, a quiz at the end, and a certificate. And it's an interesting thing for me is that, people are very passionate about their certificates and their certifications. And so a lot of our clients, they'll post those certifications right up on their cubes and cubbies and that kind of thing. But then it's important for it's just as important for adult learners. Maybe even more so. Did I answer your question, Theron? I think there was another part of that.
No, it was around the kind of the connection between, at least in K-12, where a lot of products that deliver online learning try to create an experience that is really game-like, almost like a video game.
Yes.
And I
So
wonder if there are compliance regulations that work against that.
I think the only compliance regulation that might work against that is, certainly there's some, technical things in terms of, matching people up. I know when we first started, we wanted to make sure that the whole community can communicate with anybody else in the community. Well, that is not necessarily the best way to go, right? Not everybody should be talking to everybody. And there again, really goes back to, like, when we engage with a new school district or after school program or nonprofit organization, every one of them is different. That was a profound difference between my early experience with paychecks. With paychecks, everybody pays the same tax rates, and yes, you could choose whether you want direct deposit or benefits and so forth. But it was in the world of education. Once you've met one institution, you've met one institution, right? Because they might want to have different courses. They might want to have things personalized to them. They might want to have a blended learning environment. There's so many different factors, and that's one of the things that's been so engaging with me and keeps me interested is that once you think you've figured everything out, you're reminded that you haven't.
Right. Is there a particular kind of organization that CypherWorx is really well suited for? I know we've talked about like cultural attractions, and you mentioned fire departments. Are there others?
Yes. And I would say there's actually a lot of them. So it's been, I'll answer that in kind of the evolution. When we first started with Paul's original vision was to create a national standard for training for after school professionals. So our courses now are approved for credit in every state across the country. There was no national standard until Paul came along with this idea. And we're very proud of that fact. Similar thing when we started working with zoos and aquariums. There was no national standard on how to, build enclosures and work with animals of many different varieties. There was a single standard of zoonotic disease and biosecurity, right? So there's a bird flu, right? Comes in. All institutions had to have that particular course, but from there it was the Wild West. Now we provide this training internationally in different languages and so forth. There's now a true standard. So these courses are now delivered in colleges and universities and so forth. So the interesting thing is that as we evolved, right, starting with after school, we added early childcare because people love the quality of the courses. We wound up creating courses for colleges and universities, things like FERPA and Title IX and those types of things. And then at the same time, for all of these organizations, we were creating courses for all of the compliance, professional development, core skills, right? So I even had my son go through and take our core skills, life skills training to learn how to create a resume and get a job and how do I behave in the workplace. And I want to explore different careers. Do I even want to go to college? So that all morphed into a very large industry for us now that we hadn't even thought of. We were approached by an organization to go into the corrections industry. So now we provide training for incarcerated individuals over 1,000 institutions across the country with the goal of reducing recidivism, giving folks the training, the education, the things, the certifications that they miss so that they can come out, get a good paying job and hopefully not go back in. And so that has really become a tremendous industry for us to work in. But at the same time, we're working with all these nonprofit organizations that are tangentially related. So ASPCA, International Federation of Animal Welfare, all these other nonprofit organizations, Save the Children. And so they might come to us for the LMS. They might come to us for our catalog, or they might come to us just for instructional design. So we have a number of projects that we're doing. It could be 2 courses that we're creating. It could be 200 courses. And then, of course, translating those into other languages. But it's just so fascinating because now we're seeing other new partnerships that we're coming up with to involve artificial intelligence and take advantage of those types of things as well. So sky's the limit.
If an organization comes to you and says, we want to develop a course, that satisfies this particular need, what does that process look like? How do you get that, how do you make sure that gets certified or aligned to whatever industry standards might exist, or to make sure they get, credit for it? How does that
Sure.
process?
So yeah, that's a great question. So there is quite a process to that, and the team has come up with a really great process of being able to manage. And some of these are very large, complex projects. And so what we'll do is we'll work with that organization, do the research, one of the things that Paul directed us to do early on, which was brilliant, was to become IACET certified, IACET.org. So the courses that we create are also eligible for continuing education credits. And so, as you can imagine, there are very specific ways that we need to create those courses to maintain that certification and be able to offer CEU credits. And we're also part of the National Workforce Registry. So we're very familiar with where to go to get that research. Oftentimes when we go into a new industry, Theron, we're also working with kind of the most well-known entity in that organization. That oftentimes is our partner. Because as you can imagine, we don't have a whole staff of people that are experts in zoos or fire and EMS. We work with those experts, go through a process of creating, sometimes they'll have the curriculum, sometimes we'll need to create the curriculum with them. And then we have that vetted with other subject matter experts. If there is an approving body, then oftentimes we'll send that course to the approving body. They will either approve it or suggest changes. We'll make those changes, get that approval, and off we go. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to be done to make sure that those are done. And then of course the next piece is updating those courses. So team has a great process of doing that as well.
Is there a kind of an average timeline from start to finish for a new course?
So for a 1 hour course, probably 4 weeks. It used to be 16 weeks, right? So because of technology and the tools that we use now for course authoring, and because we've become really good at it, we can create courses very quickly. And I use that 4 to 6 just as an average, right? Because there's a lot of pieces that go into affecting that, right? Do we have the materials? Can we get the images? Do we have the curriculum written? And what is that review process going to look like? Is it, because we'll create an alpha version of the course, send that back to the client, have them review it, make their changes, and then come back to them with the beta review, add the audio translations if needed, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But just generally speaking, yeah.
4 to 6. If you've been commissioned by a particular organization to develop a course, who maintains ownership of that once it's created? Is that the organization's? Is that yours? Is it shared?
So it depends. Most often, if somebody's coming to us and says, hey, we want you to create this course, we're going to create the course and give them the course file, right? So they'll have a completed SCORM file that they can put in any learning management system. Oftentimes they're just saying, yes, great. Now put it in our learning management system provided by CypherWorx. But yes, the ownership, the intellectual property stays with that client if they're paying us to create that course. Now, I qualify that by saying sometimes if there's a course that we know that the rest of our community is going to want to have, sometimes we'll share the cost of that course and we'll share ownership. So that type of thing happens as well. And then we also have courses that we've invested in, that we've created ourselves, that we just know that we want and know that we can, that will help our clients. So we'll create those ourselves.
Okay.
And we'll own that property. Yeah.
Does CypherWorx think of itself more as an instructional design company than a technology company, more content than technology, or a real split?
I would say, as one of the co-founders, I always think of us as more of an instructional design company, but we've really been brought into the whole tech side of things because of that, the need, number one, for the learning management system, but over time, all of the integrations that we've created, it's really pretty profound, the work that the programming and programming team has put together with all of the different types of integrations and single sign-on and LTI and on and on. And I'm not by any means a technical person, but I've had to become so because of all of the the different ways that we integrate with different systems. So I think we've probably, it's fair to say our DNA is in instructional design, uh, but we've come a really long way. And a big part of what we do is the technical side of things. As you can imagine, in corrections, for example, if you're providing online education, you cannot allow incarcerated folks to be able to get outside of that institution. And so there was a lot of technical things that we had to do to lock down those courses and the learning management system. And we had the people power to be able to do that. We had some really brilliant, passionate programmers on our team.
That's great. I was looking through some of the integrations and found myself wondering, as an LMS, did you have to have like connections into the equivalent of some kind of learner management system that, ingested student records and then passed the results of the course completion back to some other system of record, or if y'all became the system of record, how that worked?
Yeah, so it's funny because yes is the answer to a lot of these questions, because it's like we've done it every different way. So I would say probably more often, depending on the institution, the industry, when folks are looking for training records, they're going to come back into the learning management system. If they need to run reports, or if there's an audit, or heaven forbid an injury or something. So those records are all stored in CypherWorx, and they're stored forever. We don't purge any information. And so obviously we keep all of that information, but depending on the institution, right? Sometimes we will white label our learning management system for a payroll company, for example. And what they want is they want to have that course completion data to be able to integrate back into the payroll system so that it show on their dashboard. So we do that as well.
That makes a lot of sense. I remember listening to just a snippet of one of the interviews that you did elsewhere, where you described some of the work that happens when an organization adopts an application like CollabNation. Some of that is a cultural shift that has to be made, and I found myself wondering as I listened to you, if I could get you to describe that cultural shift, if there was advice that you would give to a potential buyer who was kind of considering this path, to help that person make a good decision.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, Theron, is executive ownership, meaning that a lot of times it seems like I've seen organizations that come and say, "Hey, we've got to take care of our compliance training, and go find a learning management system." Well, there's 1,000 learning management systems out there, and so you can take one and plug it in, and off you go. The thing that is really important is that the quality and the experience of the learner, but also um, the agency of the executive team, right? Because you can't effectively bring on a learning management system and just think it's going to solve all of your problems. Um, Meaning there's got to be somebody that's going to be thoughtfully thinking about, all right, what kind of learning paths do we want to create for our managers, right? What is it that we want to accomplish at the end of the day? Do we want to have smarter employees? Do we want to have employees that are going to avoid injuries and accidents and lawsuits? Do we really truly want to develop the skills of our staff? And it goes back to the old notion of, I always love the saying is, well, what if I train all my people and they get all these skills and they go work for someplace else? Well, what if you don't train them and they stay? That's a pretty profound statement. And I had the fortunate way of seeing the unbelievable. I mean, here I am 15 years out of paychecks, and I still own stock. I still love that company because what they did for me changed my life because of their dedication to training and education. And they're so profitable and successful because of that one piece of their DNA that we are going to train and develop our people. And that's what, as humans, I think we're hungry for that. Um, Education, development, did put me in a position for new opportunities to continue to grow. So going back to your question, Theron, is, just be mindful of what is it that you want to accomplish. You also want to have a very easy way for your people to, one of the things that we talk about is our support hub. And maybe because I'm an older guy, but I love the fact that our clients, if you got somebody there that's stuck, I can't print my certificate, whatever it is, I can call and actually talk to a live human being. I love that. Right. And so all of those types of things, what is the learner experience going to be? And then I tie that back to, I want to have a plan for purposeful professional development. Now, that said, that's one of the things that I typically am going to evaluate when I'm talking to an organization is, what are they looking to accomplish? Are they really just looking to say, I want to make sure that I stay out of trouble and I get my compliance training done?
Mhm.
Or am I truly going on that farther along the continuum to say, I'm very passionate about making sure that I'm delivering training and developing people, developing my managers for tomorrow.
Do you have a story that you could share with us about just a great implementation? Someone you'd hold up and say, this is how it should be done?
Boy, there's so many different ones. I would say, I'll choose a YMCA because the YMCA has a lot of tentacles in it. And what I mean by that is that, they're very large organization, typically a lot of turnover. They have up and down in terms of their staff, right? They grow quite large during the summertime. Oftentimes they will have they'll have a payroll HRIS system, but they also are affiliated with the YMCA of the USA, right? The national. And so there's national required training that they have to take. But there's also, depending on that state, if they're working in after school or early childcare education, they also have to be connected to a state registry because they have to show that their people that are working with children have completed these courses. They might have a requirement for 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever that state requirement is. And one of the things that we do is, once we engage with that client, we're with them. We train their leaders. We work with them to get the integration set up, help them develop their learning paths, what reporting that they need, what are the KPIs that they're looking at,
Mm.
in terms of keeping them in compliance. And then how do we connect to those other systems, right? Because what often happens when we go into a new YMCA, that new employee gets hired and they have to go to 3 or sometimes 4 different places to complete their training so that they can go out and actually do their jobs.
Hmm.
It's a pretty messy process. And so mapping all that out, helping them set up those integrations, I think is really critical. And then it never stops. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like taxes, right? Taxes are not going away. And usually there's a new tax or a new regulation or, things change. We don't know what people are going to be training on 6 months from now. So that's stuff that needs to be created. And so we have these ongoing conversations and interactions with our clients that are great. I mean, a lot of our clients we've been working with for 10, 12 or longer years. And, we've got great relationships with them. Some they've had, where positions have changed many times over their history. And that then we'll go back and we'll find out, hey, what are your new initiatives for next year? What are you looking at in the next 18 months? Let's start building towards that.
Are there trends or emerging technologies that are you think are really going to affect your business and these customers?
I think one of the trends that pops out that I'm hearing a lot in education, in nonprofit, in for-profit organizations, really across the board, is the desire for those core skills. Leadership, communication, cultural communication, and so forth. Then you'll hear some people talk about, the COVID situation that folks ran through. But those personal, those conversational skills where humans are connecting with humans, management. Sales is another big one, and where I'm seeing more of technology, which is very interesting, is uh, the 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 partners that we're working with creating AI solutions. So you have a coaching solution. So you might take an asynchronous online course, and then you might do an interaction with an AI avatar,
Mm.
and you're giving it a scenario, right? So think of call centers or a sales scenario, right? I'm having a conversation and you're interacting with that AI uh, uh, avatar, and it's really amazing, the technology. And of course, you can come in here and have it speak a different language if you want to. But the whole idea of being able to show those skills and practice those skills that you've learned in that asynchronous course, that is really starting to connect the dots. And then looking down the road is really all of the data that's coming out of that. And then, how are we going to learn, right? We're thinking about, what's happening in higher education and so forth. What are the micro skills and certifications and so forth that I'm going to be earning as I build who I ultimately become? Because we're all different, right? We all come to the table with different skills, and it's really fascinating to me, and it's a fun time. It's a great time to be alive there. But to see all of this stuff come to fruition, and it's happening fast. That's why I say it's the ability to be nimble and be able to pivot quickly is really important.
Are there particular challenges that you see coming at the company in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? You mentioned AI, and I wondered about that in part because some of the other interviews that I've conducted with folks have kind of said, as much as we're using AI, we think that there needs to be a human between the AI and the individual learner. And I know there are different implementations of that, AI coaches with avatars and whatnot. But I wondered what your opinion was in particular about that, but also any other challenges that y'all
It-
face in the next five to
yeah,
10.
there's quite a lot to unpack there, but the what I would say is that we're very careful about how we use AI. Um, there's been many stories about organizations that embraced AI early on and they wound up getting in a significant amount of trouble. And so we're very thoughtful about where we use those types of tools, and it is very helpful for us. One thing I always say, one of my lines is, hey, the great thing is we've got 30,000 assets and courses that we can use. Bad news is we've got 30,000 assets, right? Is trying to manage all of that you know uh, to do that effectively. AI has really become a tool that has been helpful for us to manage that type of thing. And then you look at what the future is bringing, and I want to go back to answer the first part of your question, which is like what challenges like there is that presenting to you. And I think that there was, honestly, a lot of anxiety, right? We've done all this investment of time, effort, and energy in creating this catalog of courses. And then AI comes along and, oh my gosh, look at all of this training that's out there and available. I mean, just imagine YouTube. I use that all the time. I've fixed my car, I've fixed my refrigerator. I mean, YouTube is awesome. So in terms of information out there is a tremendous amount of information. And so I think naturally there's probably some people that thought, well, what's going to happen to the learning management system world? Well, um, it's come to find out that it's actually been really helpful for us, right? So with all of the things that are going on politically and a lot of the nonprofits and a lot of the education space, and are we getting funding and tariffs and on, you were like, wow, would be really tough. Right now, we're incredibly busy. There's more and more organizations are coming to say we need to have more training. We need to have more, uh, develop our people. And we also have to have these certifications. And as I explained earlier, there's a lot that goes into a certification course that gets approved and accredited. So there's a difference between learning what something is and actually being certified in doing that. So, we're always kind of looking into the future, but every time I've been like, the sky is falling, I've been surprised that fortunately that there is a space and an ever growing space. Like, we work with other learning management systems providers every week. At probably maybe 2 or 3 times a week, I have meetings with other learning management systems providers that you would think are competitors. But all of these organizations work together, right? So if we have a part of a catalog and somebody else has the other part of the catalog, I always love to say, it's, do you have chocolate? We have peanut butter. Let's come together and make this happen, because it's about serving the learner at the end of the day.
That is a great way to wrap up our conversation. I do have one question that I'd like to ask you before we do it, though, and that is, given how much noise that we can often get in technology, that things change so quickly. As a business leader, how do you separate what is signal from what is noise when you're making decisions?
Yes, and that is a very challenging thing, and I've been going through that process, and I think it's an iterative process of figuring out, what is your lane, and being very confident in what you do. What got us here is what got us here, and really trying to understand what is the mission at the end of the day. And I have a lot of conversations about this, particularly in the world of after school and education, because of things like bureaucracy and things like that. And it is really important to keep the goal at the end of the day, which is it's serving students, humans at the end of the day. Everything else kind of comes in, and yes, you have to deal with these, and it's a bit of whack-a-mole, right? But it's trying to guard yourself from all of the emails and texts and information and news and so forth, and say, I've got my goal. I know what we do. I know what we're good at. I know what my mission is, and everything else is gonna, it's gonna fall by the wayside. And part of it has been, giving myself permission to say no, because as flexible as we are, we do have to say no sometimes, because it doesn't make sense either economically or long term or what have you. So that's an ongoing challenge.
That's great advice. If our listeners wanted to contact you or CypherWorx, where would they find you?
Yes, our website is CypherWorx, CypherWorx.com, and certainly encourage everyone to check us out there. And my email address is sstookey, so first initial last name @CypherWorx.com. And I would love to chat with you. As you can tell, I love to talk, and I can go on forever about this stuff. So
we appreciate you spending time with us. So listeners, we appreciate you joining us again today, where we explored Mr. Stookey's journey from corporate sales executive at Paychex to social entrepreneur, and how he helped build CypherWorx into a leader in specialized, mission-driven professional development. We hope that some part of the conversation today sparked some new idea for you that you can explore. And until next time, we thank you here from Chalk and Code. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparked new insights or challenged your thinking, we'd love to hear from you.
Visit flexion.us for more information, and join us here next time on Chalk and Code.